Welcome to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss, coming to you almost live and direct here from Cable Television City in the west side of Chicago, and I'm grateful that you're joining us for our premiere of our 8th season. Yes, this is the longest time, we're going on 8 years here of doing on youtube.com with the search words, The Greg Struss Show. Now, I took a little bit of a hiatus because we had produced so many shows and I wasn't even aware of just how far behind I got with getting everything completed on them and uploaded and aired and all that stuff. So we are back in business every Wednesday night here on Xfinity Comcast and of course on youtube.com with the search words, The Greg Struss Show. And I know that I repeated it because that's what you kind of do when you've been out of it. So being a pro, you always got to work it, because you know what? Pros are always working. Tennis pros are always working. They're always practicing. They're always working out. They're always doing things in between the season. And me, I was working on my car. I was doing some other things and just trying to make some sense in the direction that I want to head in. And that takes time and sometimes some thought, but I really think that being busy and being a pro is what it's all about. So I hope to be a pro and prove that to all of you that are tuning in tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about making amends. All right, why is that important? Well, that's something we're not seeing, are we? Because it involves accountability, it involves communication, and it involves something asking for forgiveness. Now, sometimes we harm people, we harm others with what we say and our actions, but also sometimes that can also be a physical confrontation. And when things get physical, all bets are off, because we should never get physical. And I mean that. We have no right, I have no right to put my hands on somebody else, and I never make have I come close to physical confrontation? Absolutely, but I have to dial it back and realize that there are severe consequences, and nothing really should come in between that. It shouldn't get to that point of where, we're knocking people out for something that they said to us that was very disrespectful. So I really am a firm believer. And I've noticed a little, as I'm getting a little older, that the hothead has returned. I don't know if it's the Irish in me, but we dial it back, we take a walk, and then we come back and talk about it and accept responsibility for our role in it. So what I'm doing now is I'm just not getting to that point. When people start getting, on my case, aggravating me, I just kind of distance myself, take a walk, and have a smile on my face. So that's what we're going to discuss tonight, making amends, and why we need to make amends for us, not necessarily the other person. So I want to talk about that as well, because Lori Lightfoot's in the news. We also have President Perwinkle. They've been fighting, and now hopefully they're going to be making amends and working together on getting the county in order and getting the city in order, on track for whatever it is that is next. So I like that. I like when people get together, they're talking, because that says what? We're open, okay? And part of recovery is being honest, open, and willing. And they talk about, in programs of recovery, the how. So it's honesty, openness, and willingness. So if I have none of those, chances are likely that I'm either going to continue to use or decide, or not change, whatever part of that my life that I'm trying to change, whether it's an addiction or recovery or something else. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Also want to give a shout out to Big John Howell, the great Lauren Cohen, and all the people over at AM 89 WLS. They have a great afternoon show from 5 to 7. It's fast, it's local, and I really didn't know a lot about Big John Howell. He came from West Michigan, where I graduated I graduated college from Grand Valley State University, and he mentions some of the radio stations he worked at. I think I worked at one of the stations he was at, and he's been doing a talk format for several years over at the Big 89, and Mancow, he does his show in the morning. So I think it's good. People, some of it's political, some of it's local, and a lot of it is life and experience. And I love hearing some of the stories. And one of his stories that he talked about, on his journey of broadcast greatness is that, don't do what I did. Do the opposite of what I did. But it seems like he had a good, great success. And I enjoy him, and I'm glad that he's on the air, and hope he does well. But anyway, in the meantime, I'm Greg. This is the Greg Struss Show, reinventing community television for 8 years now. Well, we're going on 8 years. From the west side of Chicago, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in just a moment. You know what? You're working it. Here's $5.
Thank you.
Go buy yourself lunch when you're really going out
I could
and
use
buying.
10 because I want the better combo meal.
When you're going out and buying rock, and it's not your pet rock either.
Ooh.
Okay.
But what
Welcome back to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss. Before the break, we were talking about making amends, and we're going to talk about that, throughout the show. But as you know, I always kind of throw in some personal asides and some things that may or may not relate to our topic tonight. So Lee, who's in charge of us, he's also the producer of Community Connection on 100, Channel 100, Comcast 100. And you can tune into that when you're done watching our show anytime. It's on demand. So Lee produces that show, he directs that show, and they have a great team. They've been doing that for a number of years, and I think it's a great local show. So we were talking about local TV, and he was asking me some questions about, some of what I had done in the past, and we were talking about, remote shows. Now, remote shows are when a show leaves the studio and goes to a remote locale. Like Late Night with David Letterman, they did a show from the Chicago Theater. So what they did is they load up that big semi-truck, pull it out, they have the power plant, the cameras, everything. It's a mobile studio. But it is a big undertaking when you have a studio audience, when you have, security issues, you have logistical issues, what are your needs? So usually what happens is a producer will go out and look the place over and say, okay, we need this kind of lighting, we need this, we need that, and then they work it out with wherever they're shooting it. So typically what happens, somebody will go out, they'll scout the place, contact the owner or the people that are in charge of it, the venue, and then figure out what their production needs are. It is massive. So when we were on Channel 3, which is WWMT TV, CBS in Kalamazoo, we produced a show out of a facility in Grand Rapids. It was an access facility, nice people. And they said, we had to leave we had a really nice show that was out on the university. But when we decided to move it out to a commercial station, obviously we had to leave the university and go to a new facility. Because we had sponsors and, advertisers and things like that. And you can't do that kind of thing on access. This is what I wanted to do, and we did it. So we go out, we did 3 shows. The first one was from a roller rink, and we worked with a local radio station. And I didn't realize, oh my gosh, what are we taking on doing this? And it never dawned on me that we needed security. And we had 2,500 people there. And it was like, oh my goodness. And I lost my voice halfway through the show. And I felt it was one of the worst shows we did. It was the most rated show we ever did. But I wasn't real happy with it because I was like, I don't think we thought it all the way through because we hadn't really done a show like that before. But did it stop us? No, because the next week we went to another venue, one of our sponsors who, was a music venue. So the idea was that we were going to get on the air by 7:30. On the air means we were going to roll tape. We never stopped. It would be done by 8 o'clock. We'd be out of there by 8:30. And lo and behold, the performers would come in and do their show. So here we are. I can tell you start to finish how it happened. I went out to pick up cue cards, poster board from a local, I don't even remember, drugstore. And I walked in and I had my wardrobe on, which I had picked up before going there, but they didn't remove the little security apparatus. So as I leave the drugstore, the beeper starts going off. The security thing starts going off. So the security people come out and they're like, what's going on? I said, look, I said, my name's Greg Struss. You probably don't know who I am. I said, but I'm doing a show down the street at this location, at the intersection. And we're about ready to go on. I said, I just picked up my clothes and I said, I didn't realize that they didn't take the security stuff off. Now, I could have been like Ralph Cramden, Jackie Gleason on Honeymoon, but I'm not having any of it because I'm already pressed for time. So we go through that. They're like, okay, that's okay. Well, I said, come and see us. We're down the street. And if not, watch us at 12:35 on Saturday after Star Trek: The Next Generation. That was my plug. So we do that show, get ready to go on, and all of a sudden they flip the switch and the entire place went dark. So we blew out a major circuit breaker that took hours to fix. We were supposed to be done at 8:30. We went on at 10, got out of there at 10:30, and it was not a great experience. Decent show came out of it, but I'm like, this just should never have happened. We had too much lighting for the grid and whatever, and that was it. So the next week we went out, did a show from a bus. And you see Jimmy Kimmel did a show on the bus, Tom Snyder did a show on the bus. We did the show first. This was done in 1997. We shot it on a Wednesday. Thursday was Thanksgiving. I had to go in. It took me about 17 hours to edit this show. I'm completely exhausted, had to make the 90-mile drive both ways to the station to drop the tape off the day after Thanksgiving and pray to God that this thing would air on time on Saturday. And it did. It was a good show, but we had another show to do. And I was like, wow, it was just a lot. But we did it. I had to be accountable, right? Because that's what accountability is. We had a lot of people working with us, and I needed to be accountable for that. So it was on the air, and then we had to do a show the following week. I was in over my head, and I realized that. And as we came to an end several months later, it was very difficult because I poured my heart and soul and everything into this thing. And that was it. So sometimes things work out, sometimes things don't. You learn a lot of valuable lessons, and you go on. And I wish I would have been better off. I wish I would have been better in letting go of those things. It took me years to get over that. And I feel in some way I'm still getting over it, and that's why I'm still doing this versus being on a station somewhere, and it's just ridiculous. I know it's coming because I'm seeing the clarity and making those steps. So making amends is very important in moving forward. I have to make amends. I have to figure out where my life went wrong, where the relationships went wrong, okay, on the personal side. When you're so busy doing your thing, and I was explaining this to Lee, I never thought about a personal life. I never thought about personal relationships because all I ever wanted to do was be on TV. And I always said, well, it's not about ego. Is it about ego? I don't know. I enjoy doing it. Some people like the thrill of feeling important. I don't know. I like doing this. I like communicating on TV. Broadcasting is what I'm about. And I've been frustrated ever since I've been away from it. Well, if you have the tools, you have the and you have the skill set, then you got to apply. And I've always thought, like, people aren't going to give me the time of day because I've been doing this little access show or this little YouTube type show. And now I'm 51 years old, and maybe I'm too old, and I don't fit a certain demographic, and I think that's just ridiculous. So I have to be accountable, and I have to make amends to who? Myself, and say, you know what? It was okay to fail, Greg. You really didn't fail because you learned a lot of life lessons and what's really needed to pull it off. Even though professionals told me there's no way you can do this, I did it anyway because I needed to prove it to myself. And more so prior to my father, who was living in Kalamazoo, and to say, you know what, everything you said, Dad, that I'd never amount to something, here I am. And I remember dropping by his home shortly before the show premiered, the weekend the show premiered, because I passed his home when I would drop the tape off at the station in Kalamazoo. And there was a newspaper, the Kalamazoo Gazette, with Greg on it, Greg Struss on Channel 3 this week, you know. And it was a thrill. And I remember him telling me, well, I talked to your sister. And she said to say congratulations. I'm like, okay. But it just, you know, you don't have time to, I didn't have time to soak that in because I was in the middle of shows and in the middle of proving that I could do the undoable. And so be it. I don't think anybody's done it since. I think they've done some local shows since, but nothing on the scale that we were doing with live music every week and performances. So it was an undertaking, and it was a great experience, and I want to do it again. But I've been a little scared, I think, and it's ridiculous, because now as we're going into 8 years out here, and I was doing counseling, and a lot of people are commenting, are you a doctor? I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV. No. I got into counseling because of something I went through in my life. And I felt that I wanted to help people. And I think on some levels, I wanted to help people more than what they wanted to be helped. And I was so excited about it. And I did it, and I helped people and got through it, and then realized that, you know what? This is just taking a lot out of me, trying to help people. So it's getting that, it's having that healthy attitude towards work and my private life. And unfortunately, it kind of bleeds into it when you're dealing with people's personal stories. So there's a thing called transference and countertransference. So sometimes countertransference, you're transferring on someone what your beliefs are, or they're transferring their beliefs onto you, like their problems. And then pretty soon, some of their problems are your problems, and all of a sudden you're kind of dealing with your own issues related to them. So that transference, countertransference gets to be, may impede that clinical relationship. So I'm still certified. I like doing counseling on television. I like passing on my stories that I learned. I still have a passion for helping people on a certain level, but now now I've been helping me and realizing that, you know what, I got to move beyond what I've been doing and getting into a professional career that I enjoy and that I have the chops for, the educational level, et cetera, et cetera. And that involves what? Making amends with myself. So that's why I'm talking about this tonight. Making amends with other people. Oh yeah, I have some amends to make. I have some financial amends to make with people, and I have some deep personal things to make amends with. And I haven't quite figured, I don't want to say I haven't quite figured it out. I guess I haven't made the leap. And it's kind of like having open heart surgery. We don't have time to think about it, because if we think about it, we're going to obsess. So if they say you got to go under the knife right now, it's like, oh, but at least I didn't have to wait kill myself waiting for it, the stress of like, oh my gosh, I have to go under the knife. Sometimes just jumping into it, that's what you do. Because when you think about it, it's like, oh my gosh, it's too much. It becomes paralyzing. So throwing myself into it and just picking up that 100-pound phone and making that call, or pulling up to someone's home and taking that risk, because there is risk involved. And the risk could be fatal, I mean, in the sense that it doesn't work out the way I wanted to, but at least I made the step in which to do it. Now, what we'll talk about when we come back is not making amends if it's going to interfere with someone else's life. We can't be selfish about that. All right, so making amends, except when to do so would either harm us or the other. And that's what we'll talk about when we come back in just a moment. Thanks for joining us. This is the Greg Struss Show, and I am Greg Struss, trying to straighten out my wire here. We have to look, you got to look a little more presentable on television. There we go. See, I feel better now. And thank you for allowing me to do that. So we were talking about making amends with another, and also making amends with who? Ourselves, okay? So making amends, except when doing so affects somebody else or myself in a negative way. Now, let's face it, a lot of family is deeply personal, and there's a lot of hot spots in that relationship or those relationships, because family knows us, right? They've known us through everything. They know the good stuff, but what do they usually remember? They remember the not so good stuff. And when we're riding high, in our new life, sometimes they have a habit of bringing up the old stuff. To do what? I don't really know what the reason is, other than to make us feel inferior or whatever. Maybe they don't even mean anything by it. Maybe they just think it's funny to talk about. But let's face it, when we've made amends, our conscience is clear. I don't have anything more to talk about with you. But obviously, sometimes people don't talk about those things. They're kind of, I don't want to talk about it because it's in the past. Well, if we don't talk about it, how do we really know that we've made amends? And more so, how do we know that we even got to a point of where we've accepted our differences? I don't know. I think like the way my father did some things, looking back on it now that I'm an adult, I don't know if it was good or not. I know that when I had a stepmother, you will apologize to Barbara. You apologize to Barbara. Whether I was right or wrong, the kid always apologized. I'm sorry, Barbara. That's what I would say to my stepmother. I'm sorry, Barbara. Now, I felt very uncomfortable. I remember right after my father married, like, what do I call this woman? She's not my mother. And my mother had only been gone for a couple of years. I can't call her Mrs. Metzger because she's not a Metzger anymore, like she was when she was a neighbor and my sister was, babysitting the kids. So what do I call this? Because I was taught, as a young Catholic grade school person, that you don't call an adult by their first name. Never mind my nieces and nephews that call me by my first name. I was taught that you don't call an adult or someone that's older than you by their first name. And so I had some problems with that. And then I said Barb. I called her Barb. And I felt that I had a decent relationship with Barb. I couldn't stand her older son. Fortunately, he didn't come around a lot. And her younger son had muscular dystrophy, and that was a whole different story. And how I kind of became his caretaker, carrying him up to the bathroom every night and taking him out to the bus every day. And I feel like in my life I developed this utility factor, that Greg's the utility. He's the worker. He's always there. He can do it all. And I don't know if it was ever really appreciated. And then one day they were not there anymore, and I never saw them again. And they were stepbrothers and stepmother and stepsister. And I never saw them again. I saw a stepsister at a school function. I'm like, wow, what have you been up to? And it was weird. Things happened, and I don't know. I think that's damaging when you have relations with people and that you just kind of disappear. So I've kind of been a ghost myself. I've become a ghost when things kind of get to be ridiculous. I reach a certain point, and I just kind of shut off, like, you know what, you don't understand me, and I'm not going to explain it to you. And I don't think that's right, because it's kind of hurtful, and maybe in a certain level, it's a cop-out, because I don't have to face the person face-to-face and say, you know what, you're just kind of not worth it. So I just kind of disappear instead. I don't think that that's good. So that's something I'm working on too. But making amends. First and foremost, I need to make amends with Greg. I need to forgive Greg for, not being so difficult and realizing that, I've had choices I've made, and I feel like I've been powerless over those choices at a certain level. And in the end, I really don't owe anyone an explanation other than myself, because no one else is paying my way through life. And what I do for a living, I'm paying my way through life. And if you think it's wrong, or you do this or you do that, then so be it. You're the one with the issue, not me. But I certainly don't want to be, it's kind of like, well, you're not doing what you're trained to do, or you're not doing what you want to do, and you owe it to yourself. And that's right. So you know what I'm doing? I'm making amends to myself all these years later, that, you know what, it's okay to forgive me for not being perfect. It's okay that I made mistakes and that I hurt people, and I have to answer to that, and I have to answer to it now, because another 10 years of this isn't going to be good, and I'm not going to be 61 years old talking about this stuff. So that's what I get out of doing this show, and that's what I hope to pass on to the people that are watching, that are going through a change, and realizing that it takes effort, and maybe I'm touching on some things, and I'm giving you permission, because I'm giving myself permission to step out of this comfortable, uncomfortable zone I've been in. And I've talked about it a year. I was watching some old shows. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm still talking about this stuff. But I haven't talked about making amends. So communicating, owning what I did, and asking for forgiveness. Let me show you that I'm not that person. Let me show you what, you know, and they may say, you know what, you already showed us, and I'm not interested. But thank you for, thank you for speaking to me about it. And, you know, I was in a situation, I left a police job. I was in police communications, and there was a sergeant who I felt was kind of a backstabber. So when I was getting ready to leave, I went shopping, I went to a bookstore, I found this book, and it was hysterical. I thought it was funny, Management by Backstabbing. And it was a picture of a guy, a manager, with a knife behind his back, with his arm around the person he supervised. So, because he was a backstabber. So I wrote a personalized note to this person on my last day, this sergeant, and I said, I hope that this further illustrates or solidifies the way that you manage or something, and I wish you the best of luck. I can't think of anything that was more mean and nasty than that. But I was at a place in my life, where I probably didn't have a handle on my anger, and took it out on this individual because she was doing her job. And I remember going back and making amends to her. She was there with the patrol officers, and I said, Sergeant, I'd love to talk, I'd like to talk with you. We went into where the juveniles are, and she cried, and I cried. And I just said, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. I hope you'll forgive me. I was wrong. I realized you had a job to do, and I was very frustrated. I was tired. I didn't feel appreciated, la, 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 la. And that's not your responsibility. And do you know, she wrote me the nicest letter a couple weeks later, stating just how much she appreciated that I did that. Because how many people do that? I guess people don't do that. And I've had to do that recently, where I've said something flippant or did something that was out of my character. So am I perfect? Absolutely not. And I'm just sitting here, and I'm just being a guy and just sharing it with you. That's all. But anyway, you can watch us here on The Greg Struss Show on YouTube.com with the search words The Greg Struss Show. And of course, you can write us at gstrussman@gmail.com. I love hearing your comments. I hope you got something out of this, making amends. It's very important. It keeps my side of the street clean, and that I don't have to have negative feelings towards another, and more so myself, okay? So that's what we did tonight on show 103 and a season premiere. Anyway, Greg Struss, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye, everybody.